Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose on Amazon.com today. Last week, there was a major shakeup in the publishing industry. The New York Times is reporting that Viacom CBS, the new company that was merged when Shari Redstone reacquired the assets of CBS to merge with her Viacom company, is deciding to put Simon Schuster, its publisher, up for sale. Now, this is a major decision that is going to impact the publishing industry because there are only 5 major publishers in the United States right now, and with one of them being up for sale, it can have a major ripple effect throughout the entire industry. Now, your CBS Viacom or Viacom CBS is saying that Simon & Schuster is no longer essential to its business, and now it's looking to shed it as part of its operations in order to get capital to be able to get more competitive and focus on its streaming services and sports assets. So this decision to go out here and get rid of Simon & Schuster is about them supposedly focusing on the future. But when I take a critical examination of this decision to get rid of Simon & Schuster, I see it as a decision that could set CBS Viacom back many years. Now, CBS Viacom is looking to cut over $750 million in cost as related to the merger of Viacom and CBS that they were able to get approved last year once Les Moonves left CBS and Shari Redstone was able to reacquire the CBS assets and merge them with Viacom. And what they want to do is take this new company in a new direction where they will go out and be able to create content with just streaming services. But this is a major bad decision because in the short term, yes, they will be able to focus on streaming, but on the long term, they won't be able to compete effectively in the streaming marketplace. Because when it comes down to streaming, the thing that will allow one of these streaming services to become dominant is content. And this is the thing that has impeded every one of these streaming services, from your Disney Plus to your CBS All Access to your Hulu and many other streaming services like DC Universe. Is the big problem they have is content. And content on the web is completely different than it is on legacy media like television or radio, because the internet is an extremely intense and competitive place. And because the internet is extremely competitive, what happens is when you don't have fresh content, you are not going to be able to keep eyeballs focused on your streaming service, and people will quickly unsubscribe from your streaming service and move on, or they will just stop watching your content altogether because it's not fresh. Now, your CBS All Access has shows from their television network, but they also have exclusive series like Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, but all of those shows are tied to older viewers. So that's one of the big problems at CBS All Access right now, is that they have a primary focus on Gen Xers like myself who are in their mid-40s, but no idea on how to create content for people who are in their 30s, 20s, or the more lucrative markets of teens and tweens. And they're thinking that by getting rid of Simon & Schuster, they will have the short-term dollars to be able to compete with a streaming service. But what they don't understand is they are cutting off their access to long-term wealth of a catalog of books that will allow them to have the source material to adapt into films and television series. Because when you go out of your way of having a publishing house in-house as related to your media assets, you have a built-in economic asset that will allow you to be able to acquire intellectual properties long term. Because once you have your editors acquiring publishing rights for the North American paperback, hardcover, and ebooks out there, then you can also make deals with those same authors because they're already connected to agents you already know. So you have a direct connection to those literary agents, and those literary agents can then bring these authors in to try to negotiate deals to acquire those rights for film and television. And that's something that you could do at Viacom CBS, especially as related to the new area of new media and streaming. Unfortunately, the owners of Viacom CBS and the executives in charge are only focused on the short term as related to getting rid of these so-called non-essential assets, that they can't see that they're getting rid of an essential asset that will allow them to be competitive long term. And what the whole thing is that when you have, again, the trade rights to the books, again, you have a direct line to make those deals and get those TV shows on the air faster, because if you didn't have them, you'd have to go try to find this author, you'd have to go try to find their agent if they have them, try to deal with entertainment lawyers, and you'd have to deal with all of these outside people, and it would take a lot longer to get the rights to that intellectual property, and it would take a lot longer to get productions up on the air. And in the age of streaming services, time is very essential, and if you can't get a series on the air very quickly, then what happens is you're going to miss out, because in the world of streaming, it's a lot faster than television, because again, you have a lot of competition from different streaming services like Disney Plus, like Netflix, like Hulu, and like Crackle and many others, not to mention the millions of YouTubers out there. There are a lot of eyeballs out there that are looking to watch content, and if you don't have fresh content, then it makes it very hard for you to compete. And this is where the sale of Simon & Schuster will come back to bite your CBS Viacom in the backside, because they are cutting off a access that's direct to content that they can adapt. And they're also cutting off their access to an asset that will allow them to have a flow to content. And again, content is king on the internet. If you do not have fresh content, then you are not going to get viewers for things like streaming services or subscriptions to streaming services. So they're not really thinking about the long game as related to the internet and streaming services. They're just thinking that streaming services are going to be the future as related to the abstract concept, but not understanding what the full concept is as related to, again, content. Because if you don't have content that compels the viewer, then they have no incentive to watch. And when you have a lot of old content on your platform, like Viacom CBS or CBS Viacom or whatever it's called, has like old things appealing to old franchises like Star Trek, and you're not focusing on creating and building new characters, new concepts, and new material, then the streaming service will not be able to gain any traction. And this is one of the big problems that I see with the streaming wars long term, is that no one is focusing on characters or creating new characters that will be appealing to younger audiences like your Gen Zs, and the next generation, trying to focus on creating characters and franchises that will be appealing to them. Now, most of the baby boomers and some of the Gen Xers, they are so focused on creating streaming services focused primarily on older characters that they're not really being future forward. And that they're not being future forward is the great irony of the streaming wars. You have all of this great technology that is going to bring content to people. Unfortunately, most of those people who are in charge of those streaming services, they are so caught up in legacy characters, legacy media platforms, and legacy material that they're not forward thinking about, hey, we need to create brand new stuff. And yes, brand new content has a lot of risks, but brand new content will bring greater rewards because most of those Gen Zs and most of the next generation, they want characters and stories that reflect their life experience. They want characters and stories that reflect the lives that they're living right now, and they want material that reflects the world that they live in, and they're not getting that type of material from many of these streaming services, and that's why a lot of them are struggling right now. So I look at this decision again to put Simon and Schuster up for sale as a very, very bad decision for CBS Viacom, and I also see it as Les Moonves looking at things long term and seeing the whole chess game, and that's why he got out, because Les Moonves knew that CBS was a declining asset as related to the media picture. He knew that CBS was not really going to be strong and competitive because a lot of the shows on America's #1 network were aging. A lot of those shows were nearing their end, like The Big Bang Theory, which ended last year, your Hawaii Five-0 reboot, which is ending this year, and I possibly think NCIS doesn't have many more years left. I mean, these shows back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they would have been canceled by the 5th season, but these days, TV shows can go on as long as a decade or 15 years, and that's never been heard of because the big problem again with the legacy media at the TV level is they have a major content problem. They can't produce enough fresh content to replace older shows on legacy platforms like television and the movies, and streaming services would be further hampered by this when they go out of their way to do things like put publishing imprints like Simon and Schuster up for sale, because again, you get your rights for many of your movies and your TV shows from authors like myself who write books, and because we write the books, we are the floor for all of the content. So every TV show, movie, or streaming service you watch, they primarily come from authors, and when you cut off an asset that produces authors, you cut off your direct access to the fountain that will get you the content that will allow you to get the rights to create the movies, the TV shows, and all of the streaming series. All of that, again, comes from the foundation of writers, and when you cut off your access to writers, you cut off your access to content, and you cut off your long-term profits. So when I look at your CBS Viacom, which is run by Sherry Redstone, now they are not really thinking about the big picture. They're not thinking about the long-term picture as related to the media world. They're thinking they're going to go into streaming and sports, but if you go into those worlds and you don't have any content, you're going to wind up with no foot traffic, because the internet is primarily a place where if you have a blog and you don't have any content up for a week, you're going to lose all of your viewers in practically that week. So you have to keep producing content regularly if you hope to build and maintain an audience, because one day away can cost you an entire hundreds of thousands of viewers, and that's something that I've seen happen, and I've even seen it happen on my own blog, where if I take a day off or a week off, I can practically wind up losing viewers. And if you don't have things fresh daily or fresh weekly, people are just not, they're going to wonder what happened, and then eventually they're going to forget you because there are other websites and other platforms out there, and the next big thing is going to catch their eye and get their attention. So I look at this decision again, and I see it as one of the worst decisions I've seen as related to the business of media. When you sell a publishing house and you're looking to go into streaming, you definitely don't want to sell your publishing house, because then you're not going to get direct access or first right access to that fresh content that publishing house usually tries to acquire. And what you're going to have to do now, instead of going to the publishing house that you just sold, you're going to have to go out here and deal with the independent authors like myself. And when you have to deal with independent authors, what happens is you may wind up having to pay a higher price. You may have to wind up paying for rights in perpetuity. You may have to wind up paying more for a series, and that's something many of those people at CBS weren't thinking about, or CBSViacom, whatever it's called. They weren't thinking about. They're just thinking, we want to get out of this hole. A hole I saw that they were going to get into, because I knew that Les Moonves was leaving Sherry Redstone with a big hole, because the whole thing is, CBS, again, is a declining asset. It has a catalog of depreciated shows, and it has a catalog of old content and no access to new content. I mean, I don't know if any of their new shows was a hit this year in 2019-2020 season, but he knew that the network was in decline, and that's why he resigned once those allegations came out, because he knew that he could leave with a golden parachute and leave CBSViacom to take a big fall. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, and my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers this April, ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage as the goddess next door steps in the squared circle against the beast from the falls in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, this April.